What is up, investors? Back again. Another stock analysis. This time we're taking a look at BlackBerry, ticker symbol BB, by request. If you have a stock you'd like for me to analyze here on the channel, please leave me a comment below and I'll get to it as quickly as I can. Now, a lot of you are probably familiar with BlackBerry. Some of you might even remember the glory days about 10 years ago when this was probably the most prolific handheld cell phone device maker in the world until the Apple iPhone and Android devices started to come out. Now, what I found interesting is they still actually make devices, but it's actually a very small percentage of their revenue now. So we see this stock rallied hard in their glory days, and it has sold off, and it has been on a flat line for 8 years now. Now, another interesting thing here, we're seeing a lot of deal chatter. So like acquisition target BlackBerry. You always hear it every few years, or maybe even more often than that BlackBerry might get acquired. Now, first thing I want to say about that is I would never, and I repeat, never buy a stock because I thought some other company was going to buy it for a higher price. And you might ask why. Well, first of all, let's take a look. What's your downside of buying BlackBerry shares? Well, every stock you buy could potentially go to zero. So you could lose 100% of your investment. I don't care if you're buying Amazon or you're buying BlackBerry. So you have 100% downside in a stock like BlackBerry. What happens if this company, Fairfax, wants to make a bid for BlackBerry? Let's say it's $7 a share. Let's say it's $8 a share. Maybe even say it's $10 a share. Well, what's your upside then? Your upside is capped at where whatever company is trying to buy this stock, that's where your upside is capped. It's either capped at $7 a share, $8 a share, $10 a share, wherever it is. So you have almost unlimited downside and a capped upside. That is not a good investment. So while BlackBerry being acquired might be a positive, I would not buy the stock simply because I thought some other company was going to come in here and bid it up for a couple dollars more per share. So getting that out of the way, again, this stock, we'll zoom in here, has been on a pretty steady decline down, although it's trading at this $5 level. So let's jump into the financials and see if there's anything here we like. Keep in mind, we've got roughly a $3 billion valuation on this stock. In the last 52 weeks, it has ticked up to about $9, and it has been all the way down to $2.70. So that's quite a range. If you want to be in here trading this stock, the volume is probably high enough to where that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, they just ended their fiscal year, ended in February 29th, 2020. So we kind of get a year-end view here. And so that's what I always like to do when I analyze a company for the first time in a while. I haven't looked at BlackBerry in a while. So I'm looking at 18, 19, and 20 revenues, just seeing where they go. It ticked down last year, but we have a nice little tick up here in terms of revenue at, now breaching that $1 billion mark. So if you factor in, the $2 billion valuation, they're trading at 3 times sales. Now, you could also take in consideration it looks like they have about $900 million in cash. So they're really trading, if you X out cash from this valuation, they're trading at about 2 times revenue. So that's, for a technology company, probably not, considerably overvalued. Gross margins are absolutely sensational, as they typically are with these technology companies we see here. Cost of sales is very low and gives us a huge gross margin. But that's not the end of the story here. We have these operating expenses here. Research and development, we notice, has stayed relatively in line. Selling and marketing, look at this. So the gross margin is $763, virtually 500 of that gets chewed up by selling and marketing. I think part of that is because BlackBerry sells mainly like to businesses and corporations and big companies. And so that sales cycle is not only slow, but it's expensive. You got to go to conferences. You got to smooge and wine and dine executives and do all that things and make tons and tons of phone calls and emails and get yourself all the way to the C-suite to maybe make a sale. And the sales cycle is very long. And so I think that's why this chews up a ton of this gross margin. We've got some other costs in here. It takes us down to a total cost here of $912. We see here when you make $763 and you minus $912 million, well, that gets you down to an operating loss of $100 million. So notice that actually turned negative for the first time in 2 years. And so I think that's why also this stock has been under kind of some pressure. You know, it peaked back here in 18 when they were actually making some money here, actually making very nice money. And you see ever since then, it has actually ticked down as these profits started to tick away. Because this revenue, while it's ticking up at a very, very slow rate. And a lot of that gross margin is ending up getting chewed up by some of these other expenses. And finally, it turned negative in 2020. So certainly something I'd want to see BlackBerry improve upon is this operating income and obviously net income here, and see if you can't turn that positive again, because that does appear to me something shareholders appreciated. The stock was twice as high when they were actually churning like an operating profit. So moving on. Okay, so they lose $150 million in a year. Can they survive that? I just showed you they do have about $800 million in cash. I'm assuming the short-term investment is some kind of cash. So yes, they have some cash on the balance sheet. They could probably survive another year or two without having to raise any money. And it is a very clean company from the liability side. We're here at the liability side. They've only got $1.3 billion in liabilities. So that's not much. And I don't see any number here that really like jumps out. And so this is a pretty clean company from a balance sheet perspective. A lot of their assets and the intangible assets here, or assets, are tied up into this goodwill. So BlackBerry is acquiring lots of companies, and so they accumulate this goodwill. So I don't typically, we've seen impairment charges on that as well. When you look at these balance sheet, we see impairment of goodwill. So this is a number you can discount. So this 388, I think you can discount it a little bit. But again, we're offset by not that much in liabilities. So it's pretty clean from a balance sheet perspective. I wouldn't be too concerned about this company as a going concern, because they're keeping costs relatively under control. Revenues are growing a little bit, and they're not bleeding money, to an excessive amount to where they'd have to raise a bunch of capital in the short term. Now, in the long term, yes, if you keep losing 150 million and you only got 800 million, at some point that's going to run its course and you're going to run out of money. Now, the thing about BlackBerry is they've got these really 3 different business models. We've got I believe this is like their cell phone. They still make cell phones, believe it or not. I think they sell them under, they run Android instead of a proprietary BlackBerry. So we see this IoT is the biggest part of the business, but we see that it declined year over year. So you don't like to see that when a company has multiple business lines and the strongest one is declining. That's not necessarily that great of a thing, although there's probably some pressures here, COVID-19 pressures, things like that. They do sell worldwide. Asia Pacific was greatly impacted by COVID-19 at the tail end of this year and tail end of this quarter for BlackBerry, while the United States really didn't start seeing effects until March, at least from closures and things like that. BlackBerry Silence, they changed the name to this, I think, to BlackBerry Spark. This is like a security. They also acquired this business. I believe they acquired it last year. So while you might see this rapid growth, it went from 5 to 151, you might think that's growth. I think there's a mixture in there. We'll see here. I'm dipping back to, this is a 3-month view. So here's a 3-month view. What I just showed you was a year end. So this is year end for February 2020, so that's a whole year. This is just for 3 months, and we're seeing here's the BlackBerry Silence. It was 43. So if you times this by 4, you get to a number close to this. So if you annualize out the most current quarter of the security software, it looks like it's going to be in line with this. So we're not seeing this huge growth. So this growth, you're not going to see that again in 2020, barring any crazy circumstances. Let's take a look at IoT. That's going to be here. So it was at 127. Notice the previous quarter period, it was 144. So if you times this number by 4, we're coming to a number close to this, but then again, we're still looking at probably close to declines. And finally, they make some money off this software and service. That was 282. That ticked up from 2 85. That actually looks like it's accelerating nicely. So we'll see if that's just, it looks like to me that's like a really lumpy payment. Like they might get a bunch of money all up front for these licenses, and then for the rest of the year it might be lower. That's what it's looking like to me, because back in this quarter they had 255, and for the whole year they had 328. So it appears to me that companies might pay them like a year in advance for some software and some service and things like that. So there we go with BlackBerry. Is it a buy, sell, or hold? So like I said, I would not buy this company based on some kind of acquisition rumor. Also, keep in mind these stocks, this is a borderline penny stock. Some people consider anything under 10, anything under $5 a penny stock. Some people consider anything under $1 is certainly a penny stock. So you got to keep in mind, the risk you're taking with these kind of shares. What I actually would do is if you want to trade this stock, or if you not necessarily trade it, but maybe you're like a shorter term view, you don't have like these glowing outlook for BlackBerry, but maybe you think 521 is going to bounce up to 621 or 721. Well, I actually might do it in the options market. So I would check if you are experienced and you can trade options. They would be very inexpensive considering the equity price is 521. I'd probably rather buy some options way out of the money, way in the distance, and see if you can't maybe make some money there. That's just one strategy that I would do. I'm certainly not an expert trading options, but anytime I see a stock that trades this low but is an active trader and might have some upside and has some fundamentals that are decent. This is not electrifying financials because they are losing money and they're not growing at this rapid rate, but it is not a complete disaster. Like I said, they have 3.8 billion on the asset side and only about 1.35 on the liability side. So it's not that bad. And they have a plenty amount of cash to survive another year where they lose a little bit of money and maybe reinvest in the business. So, and again, the way I would play maybe this company getting bought out or there's buyout rumors, I think you're better off in that options market because this stock might tick up and you're going to get better leverage and better price action out of the options. I would just make sure they are traded and they are active. Do not get into the options market unless they are very liquid and active, because you can get stuck, with some positions there and not be able to unload them, even if the price is moving in the underlying equity. So those are just some things to keep in mind with BlackBerry. I would be cautious with this one, but again, keeping in mind that this is a $5 stock. This is not a stock you build your portfolio around. If you want to trade this off, I would look for the options market, in my opinion. So there we go. Leave me a comment below. Maybe you got BlackBerry in your portfolio. Maybe you've been trading it. Maybe you've made money. Maybe you haven't. Leave me a comment below. Let me know. If you've got a stock you'd like for me to cover here on the channel, leave me a comment below. Consider subscribing if you like what we're doing here, and hit that like button if you can. I really appreciate it. We'll see you guys soon. Good luck with your investments.